Welcome to the latest BuffZone podcast. I'm Brian Howell, and as always, joined by Pat Rooney. Pat, how are you?
Doing well, Brian. How are you? The first child leaving home here soon. Not your eldest child, but the first
Yeah,
one that's going away to college. Pretty big time for you, buddy.
yeah, it is, and the eldest is leaving next week. So we're going to go from four kids at home to two here between now and the Nebraska game. So it's quite a change in our house, and yes, I unfortunately have to miss a pre-game press conference with Deion Sanders this weekend. As I'll be in Utah, taking my daughter to Utah State, but you're going to fill in for me. So I think we're in capable hands. I don't know. I'm pretty
We'll
confident in
find
you
out, I
though.
guess.
Yeah.
We'll find
uh,
out.
yeah, but it is exciting. Lots of things, lots of big things going on. So it's been a very busy time, not even counting work. But then it's a very busy time for us with work always this time of year. So, and with that, Pat, I know you didn't make it down there, but they had the open practice last Friday night at All City Stadium, and I'm sure I know you read about it, all that stuff, and saw some of the highlights, things like that. I mean, what were your thoughts? I mean, being there, a pretty cool atmosphere.
First of all, I think it was a great idea to get
Yeah,
down into Denver and to do something like that. Very very, very nice move, especially All City State. We talked about it a little bit last week before it. That's just kind of cool to go down to that venue. Don't know how much you got there in your prep coverage days. I certainly was there quite a bit. Didn't live too far from there, and was was pretty cool for you to get out and kind of have that night with the fans. As you wrote about, it's very rare that they do something like that. So very cool that they did. As far as the actual football, my biggest takeaway, I wrote a little bit in this as far as personnel and what we saw. I wrote a little bit about this in my 3 extra points column earlier this week. Wanted to maybe ask you. Defensive line looked good, was getting some pressure on the quarterback, but it's an intra-squad scrimmage. How much do you feel encouraged about the D line versus maybe some trepidation with that O line? So much is riding on that offensive line is kind of where I'm coming from. That I think we wanted to see a more kind of polished product. Obviously, there's still time to go. That can change between now and opening night. But your impressions about how that kind of line battle went on both
yeah.
sides?
Well, first off, I actually was part of a game in high school at All City Stadium and had a much better time
Nice.
this last Friday night than I did at that point in time because my high school got hammered by Montbello in a playoff game at All City Stadium. So this was much better. But yeah, as far as the lines, I think it's a little of both, Pat. I mean, you have to be encouraged by what you saw from the pass rush because that's been a question mark. I mean, Jordan Dominic, as we've talked about, did a nice job for the Buffs last year, but beyond him, there wasn't a whole lot of a pass rush with the Buffs. Whereas this year, I think there's several guys that can do it, and we saw a bunch of those guys on Friday night. But with that, I probably came away a little more concerned about the offensive line than I did going into it, and I also, I take the approach of it's one practice, and I don't want to read too
Sure.
much into one practice. And we all know that people can have an off day, and we know they're vanilla, things like that. But with the vanilla thing, I know you wrote this too, but like part of me is like, well, if it's vanilla, they should be able to block it pretty. That should be easier than running the more complicated stuff, right? And so
Right.
I came away a little more concerned about the offensive line, and uh, Khalil Benson did not play, and so they're I know they're moving a few parts around, but it's still to me, I came away with it saying, okay, I'm not totally sure yet if this is a better group. I think it's a better group than last year. I'm just not totally sure that it's going to be a really good group yet.
And I still maintain, they have to be, I think, first team to achieve the kind of goals that they're putting out there and that they want to achieve as far as competing in the Big 12. And, I think the offense line, they can't just be a little bit better than last year. They have to do more than just cut the sacks in half. In half would be wonderful. But, they have to be, and they don't have to be elite, but they have to give Shedeur Sanders time to operate and have a serviceable running game. Now, I don't think all the running game is on them from last year. We'll
Mhm.
probably get into that here in a little bit. Uh, but this unit has to be, I think, markedly better. You can't just show a little bit of improvement. I think in that group, it's just how much they struggled last year. A little bit better is not going to get the job done, especially against the better teams as the season gets deeper. And you get attrition as well. How often do the top 5 guys start all 12 games on the offensive line? It very rarely happens. And then I think some depth issues come into question as
Mhm.
well, for CU along that line. So certainly a question mark. And again, but I think you put it well. One practice, you don't want to overreact, but for a unit that has so much riding on it for this upcoming season, wasn't a very encouraging sign in that practice.
No, it wasn't. And I'll disagree with you a little bit in that I think they can be a little bit better, and this offense operates better. I think if they cut the sacks in half, that'd be 26 for Shador. That's still quite a bit,
That's
but
still pretty good. Yeah.
he was sacked quite a bit at Jackson State too. So not 50 times, but he had a fairly high number of sacks at Jackson State and operated pretty well. So I think if they can cut it in half, I think they just got to be just better than last year. And uh, you know, I agree it can't be like just a little bit better. I mean, if they're giving up 45 or 40 sacks, that's still too many. If you're down to 25, I think that's a pretty solid number in 1 year to go from 52 to that. And yeah, you have to have the run game too, and they've got to have they're not gonna have 1,000-yard rusher, but I think as a group you want to have 1,500 yards. And last year they were under 1,000 as a team. I think as a group you want to get closer to 1,500 yards. So yeah, it was not an encouraging night, but again, one practice, and I do think from that point to then it was 13 days. I think a lot can be done.
Sure.
With guys getting healthy, you polish some things up. I think a lot can happen, and then you start getting into games, and things can improve as you go along the game. So I'm not writing off this group at all. I just think
Sure.
Friday was a sign that okay, there's still some work to do.
Sure. Absolutely. And you touched on another aspect of the offensive line with the run game. New
Yeah,
cast of running backs this year, except for Charlie Offerall. I still maintain, and I don't know how much they really dedicated themselves to the run game last year, even early in the year. I felt like there were times where it could have been they could have given it a better shot, and I think by the end of the year they were just like, forget it, can't block it. We're just gonna throw it 50 times and hope for the best, and kind of put those cards on the table. But this year, assuming they give that running game a chance, what were your impressions of that cast of running backs back there on Friday night?
yeah, I think they're solid. I don't think there's anybody that I look at and say, "Wow, he's a star." But we did see Charlie Offerdahl and Dallin Hayden split teams or split reps with the first team. I like that duo. Charlie, I think, you know, I still have, I'm trying to get rid of this, but you still have in the back of your head walk on, right? And the fact that, last year they only trusted him enough for 2 carries and they didn't really give him an opportunity. I'm like, is he really going to be the guy this year? I don't necessarily think he's going to be the guy, but I think he's definitely going to have a role. And we've seen Charlie succeed. I mean, 2 years ago, he got in there and he ran well. We know he's a workhorse type of guy. And so I'm trying to push that walk on thing out of my head and realize he actually is a pretty good football player and a hard-nosed guy. I like what he can do, but I like Dallin Hayden a little bit better, and I think that he'll be their lead rusher. And there's some talent with the young guys too. Micah Welch, Isaiah Augustave, and Brandon Hood looked really good the other night in the scrimmage. He's got some burst to him, and so I think there's some talent. I'm just not sure, like you, how are they going to use it, and are they really going to commit to the run or not?
I think that's the biggest question. No matter what kind of talent or versatility they have in that backfield, and with Charlie Offerdahl, I don't care about walk on scholarship, whatever. If you're on the field, it doesn't really matter what your status is, right? But I keep coming back to kind of what you said. Is he that much better this year to be one of the featured backs? Even if they go with 2 backs, is he that much better that he could be one of those 2 guys
Right. Mm-hmm.
than the guy that didn't really see the field last year? And that seems like kind of a magnificent jump. And if that's the case, great. I think we all love Charlie Offerdahl, and it's a great story. Dalen Hayden from Ohio State, he had some flashes there. A lot of that damage, if you go back and look at the numbers, was against a couple of the worst teams in the Big Ten that year. He also had a big game against, I think it was Toledo, that Ohio State won something in the realm of 60 something to 7. You know, I don't think he showed that he's the guy week in, week out that can carry the load for you. And maybe he is. But again, that's still a couple question marks in that backfield to kind of pair with those question marks on the offensive line. And then you throw in, are they going to really dedicate themselves to the run this year? And I think that's something I'm most looking forward to in that North Dakota State opener. You feel like that's a team that you should be able to run the ball against. Can they? And how much are they going to try?
Yeah. And the other thing with Hayden, and I do like him a lot, but the other thing you have to factor in is that he was running behind the Ohio State offensive line, not the Colorado
Right.
offensive line. And, Ohio State's offensive line is one of the best in the country. And so that probably helps a little bit too. But I do like his talent. And I think that as a group, there is talent there. But again, it comes down to, are they actually going to utilize the run? And that's what I want to see with this team, is that they utilize the run. I think it helps so much with the offensive line too, that they like run blocking more than pass blocking. And if you can get them in a rhythm on the ground and get them kind of in a rhythm of pushing people around with the run game, I think that makes them better as well. So I'd like to see that night against North Dakota State.
Yeah, and obviously that opens things up for George Sanders so much
Yep.
more. They don't have to be the top rushing team in the Big 12. They're not going to be. There's a lot of high-powered rushing attacks out there. But if they're a threat, that brings in, I wrote about it a lot last year. Pass rushers could just kind of pin their ears back by the end of the year and just go. And not even have to worry about it. It opens up a whole new realm of play action passes you can run that you don't have to respect otherwise. And so I'm curious to see how it works, especially in that opener against North Dakota State. But before we maybe move on from football, one other position group I wanted to bend your ear about is on the other side of the ball at linebacker. We kind of assumed going into the season, Levonta Bentley and Trevor Woods were the guys at those inside spots, but hearing this week that may not be the case. How much of this was maybe coach speak to push some guys, and how much do you think this competition at that area is legit?
Yeah, I still think it's Levonta Bentley and Trevor Woods. They'll be your starters, but I think that based on Andre Hart's comments, he's a linebackers coach. It sounds like Nikhai Hill-Green and Jeremiah Brown are coming on, and guys that they trust more as time goes on. And I think that's a good sign. And I still think it'll be Bentley and Woods. But Nikhai Hill-Green should be a factor. I mean, this is a guy that played at Michigan. He played a lot of football at Michigan, was a starter and did really well at Charlotte. He should be ready to go and be a contributor. Jeremiah Brown was a guy that, was a disruptive force at Jackson State. And it was finally, if you remember, Pat, he was one that in the spring we asked Deion Sanders about him. He said, Jeremiah's finally figured out what he wants to be, because he was going inside, outside, things like that. Well, now he's settled in the inside and seems to be getting comfortable there. There's other guys too. Johnny Chaney, Jalen Wester are guys that were productive at their previous schools. And so I think there's going to be a little more rotation than we've seen in the past, but I still think it's Levonta and Trevor Woods.
And obviously competition, like that's another spots that's, always good to have extra depth at. So whether it was just kind of pushing guys with those comments, or if that is legit that they're coming on, then that only is it's a good thing for the whole defense, right? Especially when you go through the bumps and bruises and the injuries throughout the course of a season. It's easy to say next man up, but to actually have a next man that can kind of come in seamlessly and you don't miss a beat, obviously that's a value at any position, especially there.
Yeah, and I think you need to be in that spot where if Bentley or Woods gets injured or something like that, you trust Nikhai Hill-Green. And last year you didn't have that. I mean, it was, last year they were, they ran through so many guys at linebacker, and it wasn't because of injury. It was because they were trying to find somebody that could play to the point that, hey, let's throw Trevor Woods, a safety, in there, because our linebackers can't get the job done. And so I don't think that's the case now. I think that they've got several guys that can get the job done. It's just a matter of figuring out which ones you want on the field at the right time. And so I think I feel much better about the depth this year than even the starting group last year.
Yeah, I for sure could see that. And curious to see how Trevor Woods handles himself in there. We've talked
Yeah.
about it already earlier this preseason, but he's bulked up a little bit. I'm still a little concerned for me just how he's going to hold up against some of these rushing attacks in the Big 12. But also, always seems like that guy you just can't bet against.
No, I mean he's a football player, and I think he's one of the best football players on this team, and they need him on the field, I think, and he'll find a way to get it done. And yeah, I have the same concerns, but he told what was the number? It was under 200 when he went in and played linebacker for the first time last year,
Yeah.
and now the coaches the last couple of times we've talked to him have said Trevor's up to 224. He told us 217 early in camp, but 217, 224, whatever. I'll take that over the 195 or whatever it was he was at the first time he played linebacker. So I feel better about that at his current weight. But yeah, I think he's a sneaky good linebacker that could be pretty good in pass coverage as well.
What's going to be interesting with him in the middle there and Travis Hunter, as I've talked about, being kind of shifted around that secondary a little bit, playing on the inside a little bit. They're going to have a lot of versatility at those spots.
Yeah, for sure. It's gonna be curious to see what they do there because Preston Hodge can play in the slot as well, and you got some options there. And so I like this defense. I don't think they're gonna be like one of the best in the country, but I like the improvement I've seen on the defense. I think they're gonna be much better than they were last year. And again, it's sort of like the offensive line where we say, well, they can't be much worse. We've seen defense worse than what they were last year, but
Yeah.
there's a long way to go up from what they were last year. Let's put it that way. And I think they can make a lot of strides this year.
And I think they can be a better, more consistent, I should say, at what we saw in that opener at
Mhm.
TCU. You look at the numbers, it was not a great defensive game. But within that, they made the two interceptions were huge by Hunter and Trevor Woods.
Yeah.
Just timely and great plays by both of them. And I feel like we can see more of that from this defense to be an effective defense. They're probably not going to lead the Big 12 in yards allowed or points allowed, but I think they can be very opportunistic. Easy for me to say.
Yeah. And if they do lead the Big 12 in one of those categories, I put CU right in contention for the Big 12 title because I know Shador Sanders led offense is going to be pretty good. So yeah, if the defense is to the point that they're one of the best in the Big 12, I think Colorado's right in the mix.
Well, finally, as we speak here, we're almost a week away from kickoff, and I'm sure everyone else is just like us, kind of sick of talking about and ready to see a game. I know you are, Brian Howell.
Yes, I am ready for a game, and it's good talking about him, but after 8 months of it, it's like or 8 or 9 months, whatever it is, like all right, let's go, let's get on to the next thing. And so yeah, I'm ready for a game and to start analyzing what happened against North Dakota State.
Well, we'll certainly talk more football next week ahead of that opener. Probably knock off one of these early in the week to kind of talk about the game a little bit more in depth. But let's look ahead a little bit to the not quite winter, late stages of fall, the cold and bleak November, but a little bit of sunshine for Colorado men's basketball heading to the Maui Invitational. That's not news, obviously, but news this week about who the matchups will be. And the Buffs get Michigan State. Haven't seen them since the 2003 NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
We knew who the field was going to be. We didn't know who the matchups were going to be. And it's Michigan State and a possible second round matchup against the two-time defending champs at UConn.
Well, for a CU team that is rebuilding a little bit, I was reading your story about that. I was like, whew, that's going to be quite a gauntlet to go through right there. Michigan State projected top 25 team coming into this year, and the Buffs. I saw one publication pick them to finish last in the Big 12, and so that's not a good combination. But I think it's win or lose. I think these are great tests for Tad Boyle's team, and the young guys he's got on there, and it's a good thing, for RPI and all that stuff to play teams like that. And so, if nothing else, I think it's just a great test for the Buffs.
I don't think they'll be last in the Big 12. I don't know how good they
Right.
will be. We're about a month away from practice opening, and I'll get a chance to see them in the gym a little bit more. They do have some experience with the graduate transfers they brought in and Julian Hammond. But obviously, they're going to be leaning heavily on some young guys. They're going to need some young guards to step up
Mhm.
and play big minutes for them. And they're going to need last year's big freshmen, Bangot Dak and Asan Jat, to really take the next step forwards for this team to be competitive. And yes, for sure, that tournament, more than anything, I don't know how well it'll go for the team, but if the goal is to be better in March than they are in the beginning, this matchup, this tournament in general, all three of these games, no matter who they wind up playing, is going to be a good test for this team. I'm looking forward just to kind of seeing these matchups. You don't get to see Michigan State every year, and you know what? As good as Michigan State is, and as consistent as they've been under Coach Izzo, they also have a little habit for kind of coming out of the gates and kind of stumbling out of the blocks themselves. So who knows what will happen? You get out there in one game. I'm not predicting an upset. We'll talk about the matchup when it gets there, but certainly might be a good time to catch a team like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure the country would like to see Tom Izzo and Michigan State versus UConn. So yeah, there'll be that. The Buffs
Yeah.
won't have a whole lot of fans rooting for them in that one, but great opportunity for them. And yeah, it's gonna be fun getting basketball. It seems too early to talk basketball, but it'll be fun to
Right.
see what Tad Boyle does with this team. I think it's going to be interesting to see uh, how he gets this team together. And it's certainly a new group, and so I'm looking forward to that. Similar to J.R. Payne, and we're not going to get
Yeah.
into it really, but so many new players with her coming off of back-to-back Sweet 16s that I think both of those coaches, Tad and J.R., it's going to test their coaching mettle this year to see how they can get those teams ready to jump into the Big 12.
I'm encouraged by the pickups on the front court. I'm still a little surprised that they didn't get some depth at guard
Mhm.
on the transfer circuit. But they're gonna, they have a lot of confidence in their young guys like R.J. Smith that we didn't see a lot last year before he went down with an injury. Courtney Anderson, who redshirted last year, and I think some of the freshmen that are coming in, Felix Casares out of Canada, and then local product from Thunder Ridge High School, Andrew Crawford. I think they're all going to get a chance to play their way into playing time, and they're going to need someone from that group to kind of step up and have a good season if they
Yeah.
want to compete. And a bad season under Tad Boyle has usually meant NIT, or at least in competition for the NIT. And I think they have some work to get there, but I certainly wouldn't count them out of that picture whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't either. And, obviously we'll get more into that a month from now or 2 months from now before they get going. But one last thing before we get out of here, speaking of, tough early season tests, the soccer team they had North Carolina, number 8 North Carolina, on the ropes the other day. About 3-4 minutes left in the game. They're up 2-1, but lose that thing 3-2. You were out there, and just your general thoughts on how disappointing it was, but also maybe the benefits they can take from it.
I'll tell you what, Brian, I've mentioned this to you. We've both been doing this a long time, and every so often you go to a game and you walk away from there. It's like, sheesh, I've never seen something like that before. And that was kind of my feeling when I left Prent Up Field the other day. Colorado played great. They had number 8 North Carolina beat. It was 2-1 coming down to the final minutes. The program in its history has only beaten a team ranked 8th or higher twice previously. So this would have been, and obviously North Carolina has 21 NCAA titles to its credit, one of the most respected programs in the nation. 2 goals within a span of about 2 minutes. Within the last 3 minutes, it all started with about 2:47 left. North Carolina scores twice, and there were some defensive breakdowns that the Buffs are going to be kicking themselves going forward. The first one that tied the game was the North Carolina player shook off a pair of CU players,
Yeah.
got a shot off, and then there was a rebound that was wide open, no one there to clear it. And all of a sudden it's tied. And then after that, I don't want to take any credit away from the North Carolina player who got the superior position, kind of cutting into the penalty area, but she managed to get the angle on a long entry pass. didn't really get a good shot off, but did manage to get her legs on the ball. And, from there, it was a fortuitous bounce kind of for North Carolina. Wasn't a proper shot, but it deflected right inside the post over there. All of a sudden, it's 3-2, and you're not even getting out of here with a draw. And it was really deflating on that sideline. It was kind of really a stunning kind of turn of events. But, as Coach Danny Sanchez said after the game, it's one game. You got to focus on the positives. They played toe to toe and at some stretches of the game better than one of the top teams in the nation. You can take that going forward, but they'll have a nice little test on Thursday night to see how they bounce back against Wyoming, kind of regional rivalry battle. Wyoming beat BYU in a BYU entered this season ranked number 3, beat them in an exhibition game a couple weeks back, and I think BYU didn't necessarily have its full A lineup, but they had a good chunk of it, and obviously a good showing for Wyoming. So Buffs won't be able to feel sorry for themselves for long. There's still damage that can be done in the Big 12. I think it does make their overall margin for error in terms of the NCAA tournament a little bit thinner, though. Obviously, there's a long way to go. They're well in control of their own destiny. But just based on RPI numbers, I broke it down a little bit in the 3 points column this week. They're not going to have as many great chances for really kind of top tier wins in the Big 12 as they had in the Pac 12.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the disappointing part. And I mean, really, just frankly, it would have been an awesome thing for the women on the women's soccer team to have that game that they would always remember, and they're always going to remember it for a disappointing reason, obviously. But Danny Sanchez has a good team. I mean, they're going to be right in the mix for the Big 12, and I think they'll certainly have a shot to be in the NCAA tournament and win that Big 12. So a long way to go, like you said. Lots of good games coming up for them, and so and you'll be out for a lot of it. So and volleyball coming up soon as well. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, but just a reminder that the soccer Thursday night, 7 o'clock at Prent Up, and again against Michigan on Sunday at noon out at Prent Up. So it'll be the end of kind of a 4-game homestand before they get on the road, and really curious to see how they respond after we saw against North Carolina. So we'll talk more volleyball next week, maybe as their season gets going.
Awesome, man. Football getting going next week as well. So lots to talk about. And hey, between now and then, I got to take my daughter to college. So I got to get out of here because I got to get the van packed.
Yeah. You be safe on the road, my friend. And for everyone out there, thanks as always for listening or watching.